Hello and welcome to what is, um, I'm presuming we have already begun, so here I go. And welcome to what we call civil society perspectives on just transition and ADB's new energy policy. We are sorry that we are still virtual, but this civil society program is together with the ADB and convened by the NGO Forum on ADB. My name is Vidya Dinkar. I am the president of the Indian Social Action Forum called INSAF, which is a member of the forum. And I also coordinate Growth Watch here in India. We are looking for a good debate because we have Priyanta Vijayatunga, head of the Energy Sector Group from the ADB, also present on this panel. And we have several members of the NGO Forum who will bring in their perspectives that we know are from the ground up. And we're really going to weigh what the ADB is saying about their energy policy, about their intent on just transition, and what the energy policy will mean for Asia. We will weigh it with what our communities are telling us and how it looks from our perspective. So, as we all know, the ADB adopted a new energy policy last year. It's almost a year, and they unfurled it very grandly at COP26, and they talked of just transition, high-level principles. And today we'll try and look at how far they've come in this 1 year, what people are, that most of us from the NGO Forum were pushing back very hard for a good energy policy. The 2009, which was the previous policy, we felt had really pushed much of Asia into a place of no return when it comes to, the impacts of fossil fuels. And we were hoping for a really forward-looking, Paris-aligned policy. We thought it falls short on several counts, and you will hear this from our panel. And Priyanta will have to answer on all of this. We are glad that the ADB has shown its openness to listen to what civil society is telling them. We were hoping that through their entire consultative exercise before the new energy policy came out, that they would listen more keenly, because we engaged with them in several of the long consultation processes along the way, at all levels. We even went to the press, we went to the board, even a week before the final policy came out, after the R papers, etc. So at every level, even on the guidance notes, we have engaged with the ADB with absolute good faith. And now is the time that we need to really look. And who better than our first speaker, because she represents, the Center for Ecology, Energy and Development. I think I said it wrong. It's the Center for Energy, Ecology and Development, called SEED, based in the Philippines. Tisha Soreska is the coordinator for bank engagement of SEED, and has authored the papers Leaving Behind ADB's Dirty Energy Legacy and Greening the AIB, both published by the NGO Forum on the ADB. And SEED also produces the annual coal divestment scorecard report. So a report card is what has become very popular, where civil society really looks at how IFIs and other agencies are doing when it comes to responding to people's needs and aspirations, and how what they do plays out on the community. So Ms. Soreska is an environmental and energy lawyer who conducts action research and policy engagements, specifically in the areas of transformative energy and finance and people-centered development. Tisha, what we are hoping to hear from you is, well, none of us were very enamored with the 2009 policy that our communities grappled with for so many years. We now have a new energy policy that I suspect most people in the ADB are pretty proud of. They think it is Paris aligned. What is SEED saying about this new energy policy and where we are at? Um, Go ahead, Tasia.
All right. Thank you, Vidya, for that introduction and for talking a bit about our office. I do want to add on that the Center for Energy, Ecology, and Development is a think-do institution that's organized and based in the Philippines. And we conduct research and advocacy, and we partner with communities, civil society organizations, and others in promoting ecological justice, transformative energy, and people-centered development. And I know Avril was supposed to be here today. She does regret not being able to join us. I'm afraid she's a bit under the weather today. So I'm with you, and I hope I can answer that question very clearly. So we did publish a report a few years back entitled "Leaving Behind ADB's Dirty Energy Legacy," talking about exactly that, the ADB's 2009 energy policy and energy portfolio. And back in that report, we said that we recommended that the ADB adopt a Paris aligned policy instead of merely setting a clean energy or climate agenda. So, for the 2021 energy sector strategy, we noted that the bank placed Paris alignment as a top objective, but even then, the policy's language failed to specify that it is aligning to the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. This precision is important because warming of not more than 1.5 degrees Celsius can save millions of people from joblessness, poverty, hunger, and disasters. In the Philippines alone, the situation is actually growing more dire as a recent study shows that the sea level in the country is rising 3 times faster than the global average. That places many of our coastal villages in grave danger. In fact, this annual meeting is actually taking place in the middle of another super typhoon that's sweeping the country, causing agricultural damage currently estimated at 141 million pesos, on top of infrastructure damage, mass evacuations, and rescue casualties. Considering all this, specifying the Paris Alignment 1.5-degree goal is also important in moving the ADB towards having a far more ambitious policy concerning natural gas, or more appropriately called fossil gas. As we have learned in the 2009 energy policy, a permissive language on coal is exactly what allowed the ADB to support and help many coal projects to go online. And as the ADB is a massive financier of fossil gas projects in the region for the past decade, it now has the responsibility to adopt a strong position on all fossil gas projects moving forward. This fossil gas involvement was actually made more clear in our recent report published last June, the Financing a Fossil Future report. The report began with a discussion on how, from being coal's last bastion, Asia is now swiftly turning into a hub for fossil gas and LNG. Governments and power companies are promoting massive gas infrastructure plans in the region under the guise of development. Today, Southeast Asia has 117 gigawatts of new fossil gas power plant capacity in the pre-construction stage, and this eclipses East Asia's 77 gigawatts. In addition to power plants, there's also massive buildup of LNG terminals in the region. The report also looked into who are the developments and financiers that are dooming the region into a fossil future, and it found that the ADB is among the most notable public financiers helping bankroll the fossil gas industry in the region since the Paris Agreement was signed at the end of 2015. Alarmingly, 84% of total financing for midstream gas projects mapped in the report were found to have been linked to public financial institutions. But ADB's financing is not even just limited to midstream. It is also found to have funded 2,500 megawatts of gas power plants in Chonburi and Rayong provinces in Thailand. We want to remind the ADB that fossil gas is not clean energy, and it is not the transition fuel that it masks itself to be. It is primarily composed of methane, which leaks into the atmosphere at every stage of its life. Methane traps heat in the atmosphere far more effectively than even carbon dioxide does. In the IPCC's 2021 annual report, it called for strong, rapid, and sustained reductions not only of carbon dioxide but also of methane emissions. Apart from climate considerations, Southeast Asian countries will also have to confront the many challenges that LNG dependent countries are facing today, including the grave economic burdens that it has brought. The prime example here would be the spiking gas prices as exacerbated by the Russia Ukraine war. In the Philippines, the impact of the global energy crisis is severely felt. Electricity prices are rising nationwide, with some communities paying as high as 19.55 pesos per kilowatt hour or 0.33 US dollars per kilowatt hour amid skyrocketing costs of living. The biggest gas developer in the country, San Miguel Corporation, has two fossil fuel subsidiaries that are already requesting for price adjustments from the Energy Regulatory Commission. They're citing volatility of fuel costs and the Russia-Ukraine war. These plants are the SPPC Ilihan Fossil Gas Power Plant in Batangas and the SMEC's Coal Power Plant in Pangasinan. These actions, this crisis, the rising prices, all of these should already serve as a warning that massive fossil gas expansion and volatile fuel costs. Despite civil society's strong demands for a more ambitious energy policy, ADB still allowed selective support for midstream and downstream natural gas in its 2021 energy policy. It took 12 years for the ADB to recognize that financing coal goes against the development it claims it wants to achieve for the Asia Pacific region. And now, by keeping the door open for fossil gas, ADB is sustaining its energy legacy and merely switching from one dirty fuel to another, dooming the region to a climate catastrophe. The Net Zero by 2050 report by the International Energy Agency, or IEA, elaborates on necessary actions to achieve net zero carbon dioxide emissions by 2050, consistent with limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. According to the report, achieving these milestones require decarbonization across all fossil fuels and the rapid development of renewable energy technologies to maximize emissions reduction. Apart from aligning itself to 1.5-degree goals, we recommend that the ADB withdraw fully from financing all fossil fuel projects and prioritize financing for renewable energy projects through scaling up existing plants and ambition for renewable energy development. ADB, as a public financial institution committed to energy security and affordability and poverty alleviation, should close its doors to any conditions that would permit further fossil gas financing and let other financial entities pursue gas financing if it is necessary and economically viable. We further urge the ADB to abandon all false solutions that would only prolong the energy transition. These false solutions are those such as the CCUS, the Waste to Energy Program, emissions trading, and other international offset mechanisms. We invite the bank to reconsider support for these technologies and to listen to the many communities and organizations opposing these projects on the ground. We did expound further on the reasons for abandoning these technologies in the earlier report, Leaving Behind ADB's Dirty Energy Legacy. If you want to read more about our reports, they are readily available on our website, seedphilippines.com. I hope I was able to expound on all the points. Thank you, Vidya.
Thank you, Patricia. And let's remember that Patricia lives in a country that even today is experiencing Super Typhoon Noru. And the bank also sits there. And I think the bank does understand the imperatives towards a quick transition to what they think should be a net zero and what we think should actually be real zero. And obviously, any kind of fossil fuel, even fossil gas, is just not acceptable. We now move on from Patricia, who gave us a response to the policy and assessment of ADB's past and present fossil fuel financing in the region and the transition imperatives that that are very, very clear. Um, and we now move to a viewpoint from the grassroots. And I'm very happy to call upon Hassan Mehdi to talk about ADB's fossil gas portfolio and how and what it means for communities on the ground. Hassan Mehdi is a human rights and environmental activist, also the chief executive of CLEAN, Coastal Livelihood and Environmental Action Network, based in Bangladesh. He is the member secretary of what is called the Bangladesh Working Group on External Debt, which is a civil society platform that he helped set up of 43 local and national organizations who are monitoring destructive projects which are financed by multilateral, multinational, and bilateral financial institutions. He has been monitoring the mega projects financed by, for example, the ADB and the AIIB, and is currently chair of the International Committee of the NGO Forum on ADB. He's a really committed campaigner, and his sectors of work encompass energy, climate change, mangrove forests, environmental education, and agriculture. Mehdi.
Thank you, Vidya, for a wonderful introduction to me. Thank you. All panelists, my presentation, I will try to keep it short. It's ADB's fossil fuel portfolio and viewpoints from the grassroots, especially focus on Bangladesh. Next, please. Next, yeah. So I want to start from a short story. The people who are involved with ADB, you know the story. In 2005, the Asian Development Bank provided around $230 million for gas transmission and development project to build 165-kilometer of gas pipeline from Bheramara to Khulna to supply domestic fossil gas to Khulna city. Before starting the project, please remember, ADB itself conducted a fact-finding mission and a feasibility study by its own consultant under a 0.48 million technical assistance special fund project. Total 946.31 acres of land was taken for the project, for which 317 families and shops were displaced, expecting adequate gas supply. ADB from this through this pipeline, ADB provided another commercial loan of $84.12 million for constructing a 225 megawatt dual fuel combined cycle power plant in Khulna city. The dual fuel means gas and HSD or high speed diesel. In 2015, the government formed a technical committee, and the committee found that there is no sufficient gas at source. So the government had to scrap the project in 2016 and formed a probing committee to identify the responsible persons or agencies for the damages of resources. Next. So the Bangladesh is supposed to repay the first loan, like gas transmission loan, within 20 years at an interest rate of LIBOR plus 0.60%, which means the country pays more than USD 4 million every year and 80.5 million in the loan period without any economic output from the project. Clearly a bad project. As there is no gas, the Khulna 225 megawatt power plant has been running on highly expensive high-speed diesel, or the diesel directly. It generates electricity at a rate of Bangladesh taka 27.60, which is 400 times more expensive than the average price. The power plant is running on only 20% plant load factor. That means it remain idle for more than 9 months a year. And the government has to pay around USD 38 million annually as capacity charge, and which means the government will have to pay 836 million in its lifetime as a capacity charge. The country has to pay back this loan within 25 years at an interest rate of 1.5%, which means 47.11 million in the loan period. Responsible this economic loss? For that, be sure that ADB will say that we know nothing, we are not responsible. Someone may be. Who are? Next. Then ADB didn't stop there. Under the Power System Expansion and Efficiency Improvement Investment Program, ADB financed for constructing Sylhet 150 megawatt power plant, Baghabari 100 megawatt power plant, and Shahji Bazar 70 megawatt power plant after this Paris Agreement. On the course of journey, ADB financed $500 million in 2018 to construct Rufsha 800 megawatt LNG power plant in the premises of Khulna New Speed Mills. Please remember that the earlier project of the pipeline could not bring any gas to Khulna, and now the 800 megawatt LNG based power plant need LNG, while we don't have any LNG source in 2018. And now ADB is relying on Indian LNG, while India is also struggling to get LNG from the international market. The project situated in a city of 1.5 million people and on the river of Bhairab, which is one of the few habitats of seriously endangered Ganges dolphin and Irrawaddy dolphins. The project displaced 152 families, 33 shopkeepers, one school, one mosque, and one graveyard of the freedom fighters of Bangladesh. 9 employees of former factory lost their jobs and they got only $272 per head as compensation. Several clashes happened during the construction due to overexploiting the laborers, absence of health and financial support during the pandemic, and mismanagement of the developers. The laborers are taken to jail, ignoring their legal demands. So next. The project was approved in 2018. It was clear that in that time that there is no gas coming to Khulna through the pipeline. Besides, there is no single LNG terminal or LNG importing infrastructures in Bangladesh at that time. On which basis ADB approved this project? To take money or increase the shared standard assets? On the day of approval, installed capacity and work capacity were 31.3%, and now in this year the work capacity reaches 34.3%. To compensate the standard assets, government paid $1,541 million to the private power companies. This power plant will take additional $126 million every year. Why does ADB took the duty to diminish the economy of Bangladesh? Next. So another project is Reliance Meghnagat 718 megawatt power plant. It has the same and that there is no strategic environmental assessment for that project, while there are 10 power plants in that area. Next. So question is, Reliance was convicted a bank defaulter when ADB financed the project. Reliance Power took the money and repaid Indian rupees 1,540 crore or USD 208 million loan to US Exim Bank. In this case, ADB gives life to a dirty company which was in the ICU in the financial market. Dhaka is one of the polluted city, and you know that this is unlivable city, and ADB is contributing Dhaka to be totally unlivable and its citizens to suffer with different health hazards. ADB knew that Reliance is going to come with transfer their old machineries to Bangladesh, but ADB didn't discourage that and allowed them to transfer it to Bangladesh. The third one, ADB is not supporting the country for economic development, rather helping it to go down, because this power plant also will take too much capacity. Next. So, do you have the capacity really? These two power projects shows that the ADB took the project without assessing the negative impacts on the environment and the economy, without any understanding on future fuel supply, market volatility, and national energy security, without taking stocks of country's current energy mix and pipeline of the projects. without any idea about reducing carbon emission in the Bangladesh, let alone the zero emission target by 2050, which made us concerned and raised the questions on ADB and its consultants, whether they have capacity to assess the energy sector project and they have any inner intention to make the earth livable by the end of this century. Next, please. So the investment trend says that energy investment is increasing at around 15.52% every year, and the share of renewable energy is only 2.8% till now. So how come ADB demand itself is a climate resilient bank aligned with the Paris Agreement in this scenario? Next, please. So this is the historical liabilities. ADB has liability of 23% of whole power projects in Bangladesh, which is 3,800 megawatt, and it is responsible for 28.63 million tons of carbon emission every year. Next, please. So ADB has to take the response historical liabilities and build own capacity through appointing appropriate resource person for conducting feasibility study, for assessing renewable energy projects, economic viability, and sustainability. ADB must take the historical liabilities and reparate it through the financing for receiving 100% renewables in Bangladesh through utility scale and community-based distributed RE projects. Must help the developing countries to formulate equitable and just long-term renewable energy policies to achieve zero emission by 2050. Stop financing gas infrastructures and false solutions like large hydro, ammonia co-firing, waste to energy, blue hydrogen, or carbon capture utilization and storage, which is called CCUS, and ensure proper monitoring and evaluation of the existing projects to protect the laborers, local communities, and environment from destruction. Next, please. And next, please. Make ADB accountable every day, every dollar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mehdi. Very hard-hitting presentation, asking a lot of very important, sharp questions of the ADB and its intentions, and also how all their investments, so-called investments or grants or funds, have actually played out on the ground. Impacts of fossil gas projects from the perspective of affected communities, and in his own country of Bangladesh, its economic well-being and the livelihood realities its citizens grapple every day with because of these projects supported by the ADB. We heard the whole intent is to make ADB accountable every dollar, every day. And as part of that accountability is the asking of questions. And therefore, I encourage everyone to please put down their questions. There is a function where you can put in your questions and they'll be picked up, and we can actually have question and answers even as we progress with this panel. So please feel free to put in your questions that we will then bump up to Priyantha and the panelists. We shall now move on because it's not just countries like Bangladesh and countries in South Asia and Southeast Asia that are affected by ADB's energy policy and its investments, but also countries in the Caucasus. And here we move on to Manana Kochladze, who is regional coordinator for the Caucasus in Sea Bankwatch. She will be talking about ADB's investments in energy projects in Central Asia, critical perspectives, we call it, on energy transition. And remember that right now, Europe is reeling from the fear of power shortages, rationing, blackouts, and this winter looks like a hard winter in many of these countries. Manana is the best person to give us a perspective from Central Asia. She is a Georgian biologist and environmentalist. She was awarded the Goldman Environmental Prize in 2004 for her environmental campaigns, in particular regarding a long pipeline through vulnerable areas. Originally trained to be a scientist, she changed focus to become an environmental activist. In 1990, she formed her own organization called Green Alternative. Manana joined Bankwatch in 1998 and has worked as regional coordinator for the Caucasus ever since 2002. Manana, let us hear a perspective from Central Asia. I know there are many dams and a lot of RE projects. Most people, including the bank, will always say that RE projects are the way forward. This is what our communities need. But but how but in India, for example, we have been or in Nepal, we have been having other impacts that were not usually thought of when it comes to RE projects. What is the perspective from Central Asia?
Thank you, Vidya, and it's really great pleasure for me to be here. So in 2021, the Asian Development Bank, in its policy, commits that it will do more renewable projects, which include solar and wind, and they also take the commitment that they will try to do the large hydro power plants with very big carefulness, but the small hydro projects will go the ordinary technical and environmental assessments. So the major problem here is that it's important to remember, does not matter that this is the renewable energy. The renewable energy sector, it has scarce risk, the large environmental and social risk, and unfortunately itself, this sector still are going in the paths of the industrial energy sector development, and still this sector does not have lots of the human rights and environmental standards. And if we know that in case of the massive hydropower projects, we have the mass displacements, and it's nobody is nobody is surprised about it. It's not. We should not forget this. We should not forget that sector, the renewable sector in general, are currently responsible for third highest number of the threats against human rights defenders. And it's behind only mining in agribusiness right now. And there is lots of the people who are experiencing the problems of the wind and solar plants along with the hydropower projects, where the lands are taken without proper consultation or proper consultation, or and unfortunately this trend does not goes outside of our region. We have this type of the projects in Georgia, Armenia, Uzbekistan, Mongolia, and so on. And here, if we go to the Asian Development Bank, we see that the major problem is lack of the strategic planning, proper assessment of the social and environmental impacts of the concrete project, and related to this, the cumulative impact assessment, which is very often is very weak. In addition, we can see that the renewables project can brought more problem, including some macroeconomical and financial problems for the country. And we want that Asian Development Bank really takes into account how the things are done. For example, we have and actually learn the lessons. For example, the Shuakheli Hydro, which was constructed in 2016 with support of the Asian Development Bank, IFC, BRD, and others, unfortunately, in 2 months of the operations been stopped because its tunnels failed because of the lack of geological studies, and it has become the operational only 2 years after the additional construction. There was quite lots of the over budgeting. However, the final electricity output is still half of the prognosed. We have another big hydro dam, Nenskra Hydro, which is still on the ADB's pipeline since 2015, and it bears all violations you could project, starting from the problems with the indigenous people, with the land and resettlement, problems with the geology and biodiversity protection. That has been, numerous violations has been recognized by the Asian Development independent mechanisms, also by the EBRDs and EIB's mechanisms, and recently European Energy Community also states that the project goes against of the standards. So keeping this type of the projects on the pipeline is also shows that, and doing the large renewables without really good lessons learned shows that we really need to, together with the bank, to do lots of the more studies, because, for example, the bank is now, together with the other financial institutions, are funding the project in the wind project in Zarafshan, which is large wind project, but unfortunately it's not only one project in the region. And even more, it's not only one project in the same wind corridor, and there is planned or lots of the ongoing work for the having the wind projects in the same area in Uzbekistan, where the environmental and social impact assessment is very limited, because the land belongs to the government, and the government decides how to do, and the contract signed with the project sponsors already have very strict conditions how much it should be delivered. So we see that this Zarafshan, the Zarafshan project lacks comparative assessment of the alternatives. There is no detailed comparison of the biodiversity impacts, and we see that the project has a very, very bad impact on the new protected areas formation in the region. So there is, plus to that, there is very little information in the environmental impact assessment about the other projects. And we can see that total biodiversity risks in Uzbekistan, due to all these planned projects, might increase significantly and could interfere the migratory routes and wildlife movement in the region, while itself the Zarafshan project will drastically impact on the endangered birds. So. And we also need to understand that energy projects are not planned alone. You know, yeah. So we have there lots of the governmental systems, and these systems are often very biased and often very authoritarian or even totalitarian. Yeah. So banks should really make sure that energy efficiency and energy saving becomes leading for its energy policy. It should develop the guidelines as it promised for the hydropower plants, not only for the big dams, but also small ones. Cumulative impact assessment should be perfectly done. And what is most important, there should be real work to ensure that there is the broad public participation opportunities in both in policy making as well in case of the project development. There should be the access to information in languages that people are speaking within the country or the regions, which the bank is still lacking. Bank should take lots of the attention to how the project sponsors are doing the consultations, due diligence, disclosure, and redress. And also it's important that bank itself develop more bound human rights and consultation standards, including free, prior, informed consent policies to all local communities and not only indigenous ones. Thank you, and sorry to be. too long.
Thank you, Manana, for those very, very crucial points that you made. And I think we should also remember that this is a country or region where we have seen quite large-scale repression impacting those who speak out against these projects. So people from the Caucasus who do speak out do that at great risk to themselves. And though hydropower projects are usually seen as benign, that is not the case. And thank you, Manana, for bringing those straight up and center to us. We're going a little short on time, and therefore we'll move quickly to Tanya Lee Roberts Davis, who is the energy policy and campaign strategist with the NGO Forum on the ADB. She works in coordination with local groups across Asia on issues related to the energy policies and project level investments of the ADB and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. As well as emerging energy transition schemes that MDBs are now trying to push, especially, of course, the ADB and the energy transition mechanism. Over the past 20 years, Tanya has worked with social, economic, and environmental justice organizations in Canada, in Laos, in the Lao People's Democratic Republic, in Malaysia, in Nepal, in Palestine, the Philippines, Thailand, the UK, and the US. So Tanya comes with that wealth of experience from different regions, and she will bring to us the concerns related to ADB's coal energy transition mechanism that I mentioned, and really tell us, Tanya, this grand scheme that they're rolling out in Indonesia and the Philippines as the answer to an energy to a just energy transition. How does it really look to you? Will it does it have any problems, or is it, or should we be as enthusiastic as the Indonesian and Philippines governments are because they've been listening to the ADB? In whose interests is the ETN?
Hi, can you hear me? Great. Thank you, Vidya, and thank you all for joining this session. I just want, before I begin, I do just want to say that, yes, I'm with the NGO Forum on ADB, and I'm based in Manila. And first, I just want to also say that, to acknowledge that with the ADB's new 2021 energy policy, community groups and advocacy groups across the region that had tirelessly been campaigning for years for the ADB to end support for the coal industry finally thought they could count one success. Next slide, please. But unfortunately, there are several loopholes that remain in the ADB's provisions on coal. Particularly as of now, there is no specific screening to clearly avoid investments in transmission and distribution infrastructure associated with coal power projects. And there's also no clear screening for financial intermediaries or equity investments. And so that does mean that there could be exposure to financing for coal. Meanwhile, for the energy policy, as Vidya mentioned, but also as was mentioned by ADB President Massa this morning, is that the energy policy did indicate the ADB would be supporting a just transition and accelerated coal power retirement. But For those living in communities where the ADB has financed coal power projects in the past, including here in the Philippines, for example, in Cebu, in Zambales, in Batangas, and in Quezon, ADB's stated commitments to support borrowing member countries for a just transition ring hollow. The question remains open. Can these communities expect that the ADB will commit to supporting a just transition as they have been demanding, including foreclosure, for disposal and cleanup of coal ash that has contaminated their land, for monitoring of air quality and health impacts, for retraining for workers, and for reparations for the harm and losses inflicted? The damage in these cases extends across generations. So for these specific projects, the ADB's books may be closed, but that does not diminish the culpability of the bank. Meanwhile, even now, in September 2022, the ADB has active investments in the Damchoro coal power project in Pakistan. And for communities there, just like in Naga and in other places across the Philippines and elsewhere, they continue to hold the ADB accountable for the harm and damage wrought. The promise of a just transition also rings hollow for those whose livelihoods are at stake because of continued investments in fossil gas, as you heard from earlier speakers, but also in large-scale dams. And this also includes in the Tanahu hydropower project in Nepal, where the rights of indigenous Magar people to ancestral lands and to free, prior, informed consent have been violated. Next slide, please. In the name of supporting a just transition, the ADB is promoting, as was also explained by Vidya, the Energy Transition Mechanism, or the ETM. Now, what is the ETM? According to the ADB, this scheme is part of an effort to support the coal power sector to move towards a greener energy system. So it is in its planning stages, but expected to be piloted in Indonesia, Philippines, and later Vietnam, as well as Pakistan. The ETM is proposed to sponsor corporate entities such as Indonesia's PLN or specific coal power project operators at particular project sites to retire coal power projects within 10 to 15 years, meaning they will incentivize the company to invest in repurposing the project or invest in greenfield clean projects. Notably, however, these clean energy projects are not defined, and repurposing coal power projects could mean shifting to other resource-intensive fuels, such as ammonia or biomass. So from a worker or community standpoint, this actually means 10 to 15 more years of suffering from ill health and from chronic pulmonary and other diseases. Meanwhile, existing shareholders are being compensated for the economic loss of retiring before the project's end of lifetime. So rather than an arrangement designed to uphold social and environmental risks, it actually risks offering a lifeline to an industry that should be shuttered as soon as possible. Next slide, please. For those of us who've been working with coal project affected communities, then it means there are a range of serious economic, environmental, and climate-related risks inherent in this scheme. You can see in this slide, this does mean that it could extend the life of coal power projects up until the late 2030s to 2040. And that would send a message towards overshooting national benchmarks for 1.5 degrees Celsius. It also risks overcompensating coal power project operating companies, and it risks exacerbating ecological and social costs with no guarantees of access for communities to the ADB's accountability mechanism. It also means shifting the focus of ADB's investments away from instead investing in the power system reforms needed to facilitate the uptake of renewable energy, particularly decentralized energy systems that would serve the needs of communities. And it also could risk silencing the demands of local social movements that have been calling for more immediate action for coal power project closure as opposed to in 10 to 15 years. Next slide, please. So ultimately, this means that the risks entailed by the ETM have sparked deep concerns, not only among civil society groups that have been calling for energy and climate solutions that don't undermine human rights and instead hasten a just transition, but also those who live and work in the areas around coal power projects. Of course, it remains to be seen how this plan will actually move forward on the ground. And ultimately, our message that we want to leave the ADB with is that there really can be no just transition in the region until and unless there is redress for the harms imposed by ADB's past and present energy projects, including dams, waste-to-energy projects, coal power projects, gas, geothermal projects, and others in South, Southeast, West, Central, and North Asia, and the Caucasus and Pacific. We are still waiting for the ADB to heed this call. With that, I'd like to transition to a short video that will show which explains the particular concerns of communities raising questions about ADB projects in the constrained spaces that are now available for speaking out. And with that, I'll shift it.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Tanya, did you want to show us something else?
Nope, back to you.
Okay, thanks. So I'm sorry I have to rush to court. Most activists have a lot of strategic lawsuits against public participation foisted on them, and my lawyer has told me I have to be in court. But it's my absolute pleasure to now bring on board Priyantha Vijayatunga, who is the acting chief of the Energy Sector Group in the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department of the ADB. Priyantha, you have heard all the speakers till now and the concerns they have raised, whether it is as per what the policy is, how the bank has brought it through, what it means for communities on the ground, on reprisals, the whole range. And I know that since you have experience, including 14 years in the ADB, you will address all these concerns in your response. Priyantha has been Director, South Asia Energy Division prior to assuming his current position, which he has done quite belatedly in August 2021. Before joining the ADB, he served as the founding Director General of the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka and has been a senior professor of electrical engineering at the University of Maratuva. Priyantha, over to you. And I'm sorry that I'm not in a stable place, but we will continue to, of course, demand good answers from you and the ADB, and we're here to hear you out. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vinde. It's to start off is let me say I am really thankful to the NGO Forum for this opportunity to engage with the civil society, which we obviously greatly appreciate. As all of us know, throughout, of course, ADB and the Energy Sector Group in particular, we have been, more than happy to engage with the civil society in good faith. And we have had many stakeholder consultations and engagements with you throughout our energy policy discussions, and we continue to do so in all our operations, whether it be energy sector or any other, as we go along. So with that, let me come down to specific questions. Before that, let me say a few words on on the 2021 energy policy. As all of us know, we had the 2009 energy policy, and it had very important pillars such as energy access, clean energy development, and then the improvement of governance in the energy sector. So those three pillars naturally continue to be important, and will continue to be important in the future. So those pillars, of course, taken forward in 2021 energy policy, but of course we had to adjust the policy to accommodate the developments since 2009. And the policy is based on 5 important principles. I don't want to reiterate them, but I need to mention them here because we are basically dealing with the issues you just mentioned in the context of the 2021 energy policy. The first and the foremost is actually our responsibility is towards towards providing affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy access to all of our populations in Asia and the Pacific. That's a very important principle, and that's a responsibility we have as a multilateral development bank. The second, but of course not it's as important, is of course environmental sustainability. How we are going to tackle climate change and enhance environmental sustainability in the process of supporting energy sector development. Then of course third, again very important, because you have to have the right institution in place, right governance in place if you want to do this in the right way. And then the fourth is knowledge. We need to have the regional. Fourth is the regional cooperation aspect of it. As you know, unless we cooperate ourselves within the region and across regions, obviously we may not be able to deliver to the maximum our targets. And the last but not least, obviously we have to work across sectors if we are to deliver it right, because there is nothing which we can do if you try to be in our own silo. So these are 5 important principles which we brought in 2021 energy policy. So as far as my responses to specific questions are concerned, I will not go into details of individual projects because one thing, of course, I may not be privy to some of the information, detailed information regarding these projects, but I will answer in a more generic form the aspects which you raised. The first one, of course, relating to the supporting gas. As you know, in the 2021 energy policy, we were very clear that we withdraw formally from financing coal power. In fact, to tell you, as you all know, we have not, even though we have not formally had not formally withdrawn from coal financing at the time, we did not finance any coal-fired power station since 2013, since Jamsoro power plant. So that means for the last 8 years, 9 years, we have not financed any coal power. But in 2021 energy policy, we formally withdrew financing coal. And then when it comes to gas and oil, we have put in very strict screening criteria to finance gas and oil both. In the case of gas, of course, we have basically said we are not going to finance anything in the upstream, but midstream and downstream, we finance only under specific circumstances. And it's all given in the energy policy. We have elaborated that in the guidance note. And if you look at it, you can see we come in only if it is absolutely necessary to finance such projects in terms of energy access requirements, and also it has to be on the technology side the best available technology, economic financial viability, including the economic cost of carbon or social cost of carbon included into it. So all sorts of different very strict conditions have been brought in, and only under those conditions that we finance coal power. It's the same story with oil-fired power station or oil-related plants, which goes along with mostly with the renewable energy integration related interventions, and only under circumstances where such interventions may, avoidance of such interventions may not be possible simply because of system requirements to run a power system. So these are very strict criteria under which we finance fossil fuel. We will not finance fossil fuel otherwise. And our concentration is mostly to support renewable energy and associated infrastructure. If I give you a few numbers in terms of what we have done in the past, even under 2009 energy policy, most of our interventions have been on electricity transmission and distribution. In distribution, it's mainly to support energy access. In the case of transmission, again, for power evacuation. And now going forward, our power evacuation is going to be mostly to support renewable energy integration and energy access. And more than 50% of our interventions are going to be in transmission and distribution of electricity. And as you know, if you want to have decentralized renewable energy systems, you really need to step up and support improvement of networks, services, and smart transmission systems and smart distribution systems and demand response opportunities so that we can have as much renewable energy as possible in the system. So overall, our interventions are going to be, even in the recent past and into the future, will be mostly to improve network services. If we are coming in generation systems, it's likely to be mostly a private sector, and even and that private sector investments will be mostly in the renewable energy sector. So, so that covers, mostly what we have been doing and what we will be doing in the gas sector. So, I think I have already responded to the first two speakers on gas sector interventions. There may be specific issues associated with specific projects, and as you know, those issues can be addressed within our overall, ADB system. ADB policies like safeguard policies and accountability mechanism and so on, and we will be doing that as we go along if there are any issues with relating to those specific projects. And I must mention you at this stage that we have already consulted you on the true guidance notes, natural gas and waste to energy guidance notes. These guidance notes will provide the basis for our intervention in the sector, and we will be finalizing and issuing it very soon within the next month or so. And coming down to the large hydro projects, as you know, again, we are developing the guidance note on large hydro, and that will incorporate all how we are going to move forward on hydropower development. And as you know very well, we have the safeguard policy statement being updated, and that will look after most of any additional issues relating to safeguards relating to energy sector development and hydropower or anything of that nature in particular. And our guidance note will refer to basically a safeguard policy statement and related policies and strategies. And so we have quite a strict safeguard policy, and without following or compliance with that policy is very, very critical when it comes to large hydropower. And I understand, as you said, that there may be deficiencies in strategic safeguard assessments and particularly relating to renewable energy projects. And I'm pretty sure these loose ends will be tied up, during the update of safeguard policy statement. And Tanya, you brought in the necessity to make sure that just transition, the energy transition is just. And as you know, just transition it has been highlighted right throughout our discussions, and we have specifically a group under climate change division looking at just transition, and ETM related interventions obviously will look into just transition. And so I don't want to go into details of it, but just transition is very much high in our agenda when it comes to energy transition. As far as energy transition mechanism is concerned, it will have to comply strictly with the energy policy, and energy policy is very clear. We will not finance any coal assets which will extend the lifetime of coal assets. At the same time, energy transition mechanism quite clearly has indicated that it's meant to retire coal-fired power stations, decommission coal-fired power stations at a short period as against this original operations time. So we expect the replacement of capacity to come from clean energy sources, and of course that will have to be decided depending on the investment requirements of specific renewable energy sources. But as you know, we have two funds set up under to be set up under energy transition mechanism, one to decommission coal power plant, another to develop clean energy. So these two go hand in hand, and obviously the lost capacities will be replaced with clean energy sources. So I can't go into so much of details. I mean, I have already run out of time, and it's not fair by people who would like to ask many questions, waiting to ask questions, and I'll stop there. Overall, what I'm trying to say is that we take the 2021 energy policy, safeguard policy statement, and whatever guidance we have already issued and going to be issued, we will definitely follow, and we'll be complying with them. And we'll make sure that every project which we take to the board for approval and implemented on the ground will strictly follow those policies and strategies and the guidance notes. And that assurance I can give you from our side. With that, I stop here and hand it back to Winder.
All right. So I guess it seems that Vidya has had to duck out. So I'm just going to then we have lots of questions coming in. So I will read a couple of them, and then maybe we can shift back to you, Priyantha, to respond. One of the first ones with the most votes is how many fossil fuel projects directly or indirectly are under construction or in the pipeline, and is there any plan for reparations? That's number one. Number two, with the Tanahu hydropower project, how will the ADB energy policy ensure that it moves away from funding unsustainable large hydro, which are harmful to communities, and instead focus on community-led energy solutions? And the third one, before we go back to you, Priyantha, is the ADB has focused its waste portfolio on waste energy incinerators, approximately $1 billion US. How will the ADB ensure future investments focus on upstream measurements, prevention, reuse, recycling, as mandated by the safeguard policy and energy policy? I think all three are over to you, Priyantha, so go for it.
Thank you very much, Tanya, for those questions. So let me quickly go back to my numbers, which are quite important when it comes to giving exactly the situation. And in fact, in terms of financing fossil fuel projects, as you probably would know, we have not financed a fossil fuel project since 2019. Though we have had other energy projects in the pipeline, and in fact, as you know, the past fossil fuel projects, if you look at, the percentage of financing gone into some of those fossil fuel projects varied from as much as 45% as back as 2009 to less than 1%, as low as 1% in 2019 and 2020. And I had the details of for the next 3 years, because as you know, when it comes to future energy sector pipelines, usually we don't have pipelines, clear pipelines beyond 2 to 3 years in the energy sector, typically, because we start financing, the projects usually pass to us within the next, 1 to 2 years for financing once the projects are almost ready for financing. And so if you look at them, again, I must go back to my numbers, and more than 50-60% of the investments will be in energy, electricity transmission network services. Because as I said, our concentration will be on providing network services to make sure that we can absorb both centralized and decentralized renewable energy sources and related technology, innovative technologies, so that eventually we'll be able to put in more and more renewable energy. And then the other largest component of our future, the next 3 years investments would be mostly on the sector development and institutional reforms. As you know, it's not just investment in infrastructure which matters, but the governance improvement. Because if you don't improve the financial sustainability and the governance in the sector, you will not be able to get the sector developed at the rates which they are supposed to be developing to meet the demands in the region. So we will be spending quite a substantial chunk of money on energy sector development and institutional reforms in the next 2 to 3 years. So these two areas will almost form more than almost 75% of investments, or even more, during the next 2 to 3 years. Of course, when it comes to renewable energy generation related investments, we don't have that much. Simple reason, of course, as you know, it's mostly in the private sector space. So whatever investments which will come in will be in the private sector department, and even those investments usually don't come so many years in advance. Usually they come within the year or maybe 1 to 1.5 years, and therefore some of those investments are not reflected in here in the next 3-year pipeline. So the other on Tanahu. Tanahu, interestingly, it's a medium scale hydropower project, about 120 or 150 megawatts or so, if I can remember right. And we strictly go by our own accountability mechanism. As I know, we have been dealing with the communities very closely, and those processes will continue. And our project division, which is South Asia Energy Division, along with the accountability, those who are involved with the accountability mechanism, will quite closely follow the procedures and make sure that the justice is provided to the communities affected wherever it's necessary. And on the waste to energy projects, I don't have the numbers, the kind of numbers you quoted, but one thing I have to make sure that remind you that we will go strictly by the energy policy what we have. We have specifically stated that ADB will support waste to energy investments for heat and or electricity, provided that the feedstock for combustion results from a prudent order of waste management priorities. So it's very clear that we will go by the waste management priorities, and only at the last resort we will have incineration when it comes to waste to energy. And we have already developed the waste to energy guidance note, and we have shared the key highlights of this guidance note with the NGO Forum and with the meeting which you had, Tanya, and we will go by that guidance note, and we'll make sure that whatever stated in the policy is strictly complied with as we move forward on the waste to energy projects. Let me stop there and hand back to you, Tanya. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those responses. We do hope that in terms of the guidance notes, that they will be shared more widely and that there will be more discussions around them before they become finalized. I will now go back to the list of questions just to go through them quickly because we're running close on time. One is also in relation to the ADB's commitment to Paris alignment, and that asking how you will involve stakeholders in this process to ensure that Paris alignment methodology is ambitious, fossil-free, and avoids false solutions. That's the first one. Also to you, Priyanta. Second one, also on fossil fuels, is what is the plan of the ADB to reoperate or mitigate its historical liabilities through investing in fossil fuels, particularly financing, for example, gas power projects and gas infrastructure, as Mahdi spoke about in Bangladesh. Also, I'll just continue to go a little bit more on some of the other fossil fuel related questions we have coming up here. So that's on gas and in Bangladesh. Another one is on the one hand, ADB has pledged to invest in the ETM, but on the other, it has released recent tranches for the Jamshoro coal power project in Pakistan. Why does the ADB have this dual standard, and how are you operating through as a responsible financial institution, doing both at the same time? I will also, just another one really quickly on coal, and it relates to the ETM, is what is the expected cost other than buying coal-fired plants for the ETM process for one country? And how is it going to be calculated by the ADB?
Yeah, thank you very much again for those questions. I might come back to you on clarifications because I missed probably one of them. And ADB's commitment to Paris alignment, as you know, we have already committed for Paris alignment all our sovereign operations by 2023. Middle of 2023, and then all non-sovereign operations by 2025, and 80% of non-sovereign operations by 2023, and the rest by 2025. So ADB is committed, as you know, to have its all operations by Paris aligned by 2025. So it's a commitment we have given, and we have incorporated that in all our policies. So I forgot to mention that energy policy may not have mentioned Paris alignment per se. I can't remember exactly, but it's obvious that we have committed as a bank for Paris alignment, which means energy policy plus Paris alignment will have to be read together when it comes to energy sector operations. And energy sector operations, we have, you know, along with all the other sectors, we have already provided our inputs when it comes to Paris alignment, how we are going to make sure that our energy projects are Paris aligned. In fact, it's part of the Paris alignment guidance note, which is being developed and finalized within the next few weeks. And so that's a commitment from our side. So we'll make sure we will have resources in place to assess the Paris alignment you know, along the in line with the guidance note, and we will have our operations, particularly energy sector operations, along those lines. On the historical liabilities relating to fossil fuel projects, of course, I cannot comment on that at the moment, because I am not really somebody who deals with that subject. Probably I may have come back to you on that. But one thing I can you know, respond to, that is whatever we have done, we are responsible, and we'll make sure that all our policies have been complied with, and if there are any lapses, obviously there will have to be some remedial measures within our own system itself. So beyond that, I cannot comment, because I'm not privy to the you know, whatever we need to do in that particular space. So, but the next question, Tanya, on ETM and Jamshoro, exactly, I did not get the point there. What you really come to, and I'll request you more clarifications on that. But on the cost of ETM, there are two, cost regimes we are looking at here. One, of course, the decommissioning of coal power plants, and therefore costs rather the expenditure, the financing associated with that part of the investment, that is decommissioning of accelerated decommissioning of coal power plants. And that's one part. And the other is, in fact, the replacement of this lost capacity. Of course, it may not be one-to-one. There may be other, generation planning. Generation plan may pick up these lost capacity in the long-term planning process. But of course, we'll do our best to replace this capacity as much as possible, and that investment bit comes in parallel with it. So those are the two main financing areas or financing components we are looking at in energy transition mechanism. So that's why we have this clean energy fund and the other, of course, coal decommissioning fund. The question on Jamshoro and ETM, Tanya, can you please repeat it? I'm not sure whether I got it right.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yes, please.
Great. So it's just a question on the one hand, the ADB is continuing to invest, continued tranches are moving forward for the Jamshoro coal power project. It's active on your website. And yet at the same time, you have the ETM that is moving forward and proposed to be rolled out in the future in Pakistan. So having these two at the same time, how do you reconcile the fact that there are these two types of investments?
Yeah. Okay. Now I got it. Yeah. Thank you very much. But I must tell you that it's a timing issue. As you know, Jamshoro project was approved in 2013, and ETM is something which we have now and being considered. So it's a timing issue. Then we have to deal with that time lag as we move along. And we need to keep in mind that we have, along with all this project, we have legal agreements, we have commitments to these countries, and we cannot separate them. So therefore, it's basically a timing issue. I agree with you. In the eyes of outsiders, it may not be, seen as right. But it's a timing issue of the two systems we are dealing with, and we have already got Jamshoro project approved, and we have commitments, legal commitments accordingly, and then you have the energy transition mechanism which we are working with. So that's the answer which I can give as far as that is concerned. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay. Thank you for those answers. I know we're running super short, but finally, just to link to that question, there is a follow-up question on that specific aspect, saying as the ETM gets rolled out, what are the processes that the ADB will put in place to support closure and just transition in communities where the ADB has itself financed coal power projects? Looking at whether also the ADB will finally also, just one last one on reprisals. What is the ADB going to do to take into account how communities are affected by reprisals when they speak out about the negative impacts of these projects?
Yeah. Tanya, thank you once again. And as far as ETM is concerned, as I indicated to you, ETM has energy transition mechanism has it's a total solution we are looking at here. We are looking at decommissioning of accelerated decommissioning of coal-fired stations and development of clean energy solutions, and both these just transition. We want to make sure that all this transition happens in a just manner. And so we have a climate change division and a just transition group separately looking at it, and they work very closely with the ETM team to make sure that just transition, the energy transition is just as far as these communities are concerned. So the relevant interventions will come along with the the ETM and whatever we do under ETM. So it's not just isolated intervention in terms of just decommissioning our coal power plants or just bringing in renewable energy. This is a total solution, and ETM ETM team has been having very regular consultations with the Just Transition team in the energy, sustainable, the climate change division, and they work very closely with each other. And also, as I understand, ETM team has regular consultations with NGOs and CSOs, and there will be that consultation will be continuous and will continue to be part and parcel of this whole process of ETM projects. So overall, Just Transition is an inclusive part of the ETM mechanism, energy transition mechanism we are looking at. Did I leave out anything else?
So this is the issue of reprisals. How
Yes.
how is the ADB going to deal with the account for the concerns of CSOs being raised about the impacts of reprisal risk?
As you know, again, ADB is quite transparent, and ADB has its own mechanisms of stakeholder consultations, and then also, the stakeholders have various ways of bringing up and issues to ADB, and so I presume ADB can, of course, through its own policy dialogue with the governments that we help, we can make sure that such reprisals are not accommodated by the government and related agencies. So as you know, obviously there are a lot of unwritten things what we have when we deal with these project agencies. We have a very strong, very detailed policy dialogue with them, and we usually bring them on board on such things. So the way we deal with things like reprisals will be in that manner. But of course, there is a formal mechanism, also grievance redress mechanisms, which usually put in place in all these projects, and ADB can accommodate any of those complaints at any time, and we can always take it up with the governments and the relevant agencies, because these agencies and the governments work with us right throughout. So it's not just one-off project which matters here, and which means the whole assistance program can be affected if there are such reprisals. Therefore, everybody is conscious of such issues, and ADB has quite an important role to play as an honest broker in such situations. So we have that ability to deal with governments and that space. I think we can use that to support such issues if there are any, by any chance. Yes. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those responses. We have several other questions that have come in, but given that we're down to just a couple of minutes left, I do want to thank all the speakers for joining this session, also Priyantha for your responses. But to emphasize very much the sentiments that remain in the questions that have not been yet responded, just to go quickly through them, it includes raising concerns that to make sure that the updated safeguards are applied to the ETM projects. Also concerns that why is the Jamshoro coal power project not actually the first one to be taken up by the ADB under the ETM. Also, in relation to the ADB's guidance notes, wondering why there is not yet information on how intermediated finance will be dealt with, and then asking when will the ADB actually stop initiating projects that perpetuate extraction and the use of coal, including roads, transit, ports, and urban housing, and hoping that in the future, the ADB will push forward on a more people's democratic ownership over energy resources, and finally raising concerns about as was raised from the very beginning, the absolute realities of communities at the front lines in this region, including in the Philippines, but also in Pakistan, suffering from the catastrophic weather issues, including monsoons and typhoons and other climate change calamities, and calling for the debt to be dropped. I think there, as you can see, there's many questions that continue to be raised, and we hope that that instead of this kind of a situation where we remain online, that we will be soon able to meet in person and have a better dialogue and discussion where we can work through these issues. I think we're out of time, but if there's any last words from you, Priyantha, and from all of you before we say goodbye.
Let me go off and thank you very much, Rania, for this opportunity, as I said, and this is a very, very good engagement which we would like to continue. And this is time that you can provide your inputs and help us. And as I have been in touch with you on the guidance notes, and we'll continue to do that, and we will be in touch with you. And it's time that you help to make even things like energy transition mechanisms, the way it should be implemented by engaging very closely with us. And with that, and we'll continue, we will be always happy to engage with you in good faith. With that, thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last words from anyone of the panelists before we close?
No, time, I think already we are over time. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you for joining the session. Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.